A word to the wise. We are an explicit podcast tackling content with adult themes as well as entering spoiler territory if you aren't caught up with us yet. That point for us today would be through chapter 32 of Mistborn, The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson.
Hey there, this is Cross.
And I'm PJ.
And we are hungover. I mean, Words and Whiskey, a podcast for veteran and novice readers alike. We tackle fiction novels and love to talk about what we're drinking. You should think of us as your intoxicating weekly book club.
One of us is hungover. One of us is really sore from, working on, home improvement projects.
I am also sore, so it's unfair of you to not assume that I am sore and hungover.
I did drink quite a bit yesterday.
In experimentation. Anyway, point being, welcome to Words and Whiskey. I am dying inside. Today is our 8th episode discussing Mistborn, The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, and we're going to chat about chapters 29 through 32. Last night, I was a part of a cocktail contest, and so there were 10 cocktails on the table. I won one of the categories, and I took second or third in the other one. And
you feel robbed for that one, right?
I do feel robbed. There's a longer story here, but before we get into that longer story, PJ, what are you drinking? Let's start there.
There's a longer story that you can listen to if you subscribe to our Patreon and listen to The Devil's Cut.
I already talked about it. You're right.
So
if you're a member of our Patreon, again, this episode will come out before it changes. If you want to join our Patreon, you can do it at a slightly lower tier, at the barback tier. For $3 if you get in before the end of January. If not, you will be permanently at the $4 tier price instead.
This will release just before the month turns over. So you've got 2 or 3 days. I can't do that good of math right now. I kind of have a degree in math, and I can't do that math right now.
You almost have 2 degrees in math.
Well, I have a minor in math for my first degree. So...
I know, but on top of that, engineering and physics, come on.
Yeah.
Those are math degrees.
I mean, okay, I can just
math.
click on my calendar. Let's see. It comes out on the 27th, so you've got
4 days.
Today and 3 more days before pricing goes up to $4 for the barback tier. The reason we're doing that is simply because anything below $3.50, Patreon takes a larger chunk. So moving up to 4 means that we get more of a percentage of what you guys are.
We can do more stuff for effectively the cost of a cup of coffee. And it impacts us more directly by making a small change.
Exactly.
All right, PJ, what are you drinking?
So it is morning time.
It is morning time this time.
Morning.
It's a rare time.
As I mentioned last episode, destigmatize old-fashions in the morning.
I can't believe you did this.
So it has maple syrup, so it's breakfast. It is a Rye Maple Old-Fashioned. And what I really want to... So I'll just give the breakdown of the cocktail real quick. It is 3 ounces of rye, half an ounce of maple syrup, 4 dashes of orange bitters, and a cocktail chair. I would have added orange. I didn't have an orange, but I would have garnished with an orange swath, but didn't have an orange. So, but that's how I normally would have made this rye maple orange old fashioned. So instead I used orange bitters. But what I really want to talk about is this rye. It is fucking delicious. It's very, very rye spicy. Some ryes are more like bourbon in that they're a little bit sweeter, a little bit smoother. This one actually leans into the spice of the rye, which I really appreciate. And also it's from a new distillery that's opening up 20 minutes away from my house.
Yeah.
So
what distillery? Talk about it.
Stearns American. So technically this is the first batch. I met the owner and distiller at the liquor store. I went to go get rum. All I went to go get was rum. I needed a rum to make a basil daiquiri that's really fucking good, and I'll be doing that on the show soon. But I went to get rum and ended up with a 175 of Rakia rum.
Which is
I ended up with this bottle of rye. I met the owner, distiller. This is batch number 1, like the only batch they've ever made. I don't think it's even on the shelf. He just had a little like table set up and he was like meeting with people. I got a couple stickers, got to talk to the guy for a little bit, and he signed my bottle, which is super cool and kind of fun. But I looked at the bottle. This was distilled by Bennett Brewstillery out of St. Paul, I think. I can't remember where they're out of. I think they're out of St. Paul. I think St. Paul,
yeah.
Or Roseville. They're out of Roseville.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So their distillery is not yet set up. They have the building. They're building it out. But 95 proof, spicy, which is like a super, super plus for me. Finished on charred pimento wood, which I've never seen before.
Pimento wood. Interesting.
Yeah.
Weird.
I'm super pumped.
What are you following that up with? Oh. No, talk.
I'm going hyper local today, Crossland. Yeah. No, I was just going to say he's a super cool dude, and I'm excited to like go to his place of business whenever they actually open up. But like I said, going hyper local today, I have a bottle of something that you and I used to fawn over quite a bit when we lived in St. Cloud together.
True.
Which is Beaver Island Brewing Company's Barrel Age series. So this is Son of Drago, which, first of all, has some of my favorite bottle art of any beer. It is very Russian in design with boxing gloves. Very simplistic, very stylized, and it looks really, really cool. But it is their Revolution 3, their 3rd anniversary, like commemorative beer, aged for, I think, 18 months on wild turkey barrels. So
wild turkey barrels.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Wild turkey barrels. So I'm super pumped. I've been saving this for years. I can't remember when this came out. Let's see.
I think it was like 2018, right?
I think Son of Drago did.
I think
but
so.
I think Rev 3 was 2016.
Yes, I think that was 2016. Right. But Son of Drago, I think it was 2018.
Anyway, Crossland, what are you drinking?
I am obviously hungover, folks. In case you were blissfully unaware, I am having what I'm calling the bloody fucking help me. It's just a Bloody Mary. Nothing crazy. Rakia vodka, 2 ounces. So the mix, actually, I should clarify. My younger brother, Bingham, moved in with my brother-in-law and sister for like a month. Like, just went and hung out at the beginning of the pandemic because he didn't want to be kind of on campus at school. He had time. He was like, fucking, I can do this remotely. I'm going to go hang out with my siblings. So he moved in with Piper and Jake, and they perfected over the course of that month the Bloody Mary mix recipe of their choosing and choice. So this is in their spirit, in their style. I am missing an ingredient. I replaced it with something else spicier. It is fucking hot. So we're going to start with the base mix. You got 2 shots of vodka in this bad boy, 16-ounce glass, ice to like fill. So you like put a good amount of ice in. 2 shots of vodka, pepper throughout. So make sure you heavily pepper it. Charleston mix, which is like a spicy Bloody Mary mix. It's a particular brand. You can use
not Charleston Chews.
Not Charleston Chews. Bingham prefers the Zing Zang, but this is like the premium version of that. And he's like, do the Zing Zang for most people. And then you do a little bit of pickled jalapeno juice. So you pour in just like a little bit of the jalapeno juice out of your jalapeno jar, like maybe a half ounce of that. Hot sauces. So generally you start with a Frank's Tabasco or Frank's hot base, like maybe a half ounce. And then with Tabasco, you do like maybe a 1/4 ounce. So ratios there. What I did is slightly different. I did the Tabasco and a scorpion pepper Tabasco because I am a fucking moron. This is so hot. Like, it's delicious, but this is, every time I take a sip, PJ's been watching me because we're on camera, but like every time I take a fucking sip, I like flinch physically because it's so hot. And I only put 2 dashes of the scorpion in this, so it's not that much. It's just so pervasive.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially being a liquid, you know?
Oh, my God. Yeah. Oh, fuck. All right. You're going to know every time I take a drink this episode. That's all I'm saying.
That's fair.
Everyone will know every time I take a drink. I am following that up with a beverage that I shared in the Discord previously, but from Highwire Brewing, the 3-year Sour Blonde. So this is kind of like an anniversary beer that they're doing, but it's a 3-year aged sour blonde. And it is so good. This is one of the best beers I've had, bar none.
I love like aged sours.
This is
they get so complex, and you get because you can't do something super sweet like that. Mm-hmm. And that's the state of sours right now are like fruit bombs.
Yep.
So these aged sours are very mouthfeel wise, they're thin but effervescent usually, but like really tart and really complex with like oakiness or just a little bit more of a depth of character from the aging process. It's super fun. I love aged sours.
I love aged sours.
Oh,
to your point, I was just going to say, I was like, that's one of my favorite things. I'm so glad to get to have this. So from Highwire Brewing, the 3-year barrel aged 3-year sour. I'm going to go back and grab 2 more. Is what I decided.
Yeah,
like it
sounds
is.
good.
Oh my God.
Yeah, sit on them. I've got a shit ton of bottles.
Yeah,
I need to go through them.
Time to move into the episode, I think. So with that, let's move into PJ's predictions. I didn't take a look at any of these. We've got one here for you. So, reading this, but then we get a conversation with Lady Shan where she seems to recruit Vin, believing her soothing would be enough to push her into service. But more importantly, there's the question of what Shan knows about the text that Ellen has and what she plans on doing with that information. What do you think was the question? Your answer was...
Shan seems much more slippery than other noble ladies, and I can't help but think that it could be some sort of trap for Vin. For instance, if Shan already knows exactly what those texts are and is using this as a test to see what Vin's alignment is. It could also be that she's just suspicious of Ellen and, like the book seems to be implying, is using her soothing to get more info. So, I don't know if that's wrong. But it's not the point.
I think you're right, but we didn't define the question well enough. So yeah. I'll take the drink.
No, you won't. I didn't say Mistborn.
Oh, fair enough. You're right. You that was actually the fun part of this conversation is I was seeing if you were going to figure it out. I didn't figure this out when I read it the first time.
No, I
was not keyed
I didn't
in
at all.
And I was shocked when that reveal happens in that moment that we'll talk about in a bit. But it was a moment. It was good.
I had completely forgotten the idea that Mistborn were like hidden, even within the noble society. Like I knew they were rare, but since they knew she was a soother, I had just written it off like, okay, these people know who's an Allomancer here and what they are. Mm-hmm. So she's a soother. She's a soother. All right, cool.
Isn't that interesting, though? She's probably consistently a soother, you know? Like, that's an interesting kind of, like, layer and flavor on top of the story is the idea that every time we've met Shan, she's been a soother, and we finally get this perspective of her being a Mistborn, which is interesting. We'll get into that in a second.
So, I drank for that. I don't know if it really answered anything, but...
Yeah, I don't think you actually put an answer there.
I don't think there was an answer there.
We have one more here as well. Shan's dismissal of Vin on her approach seems strange. What do you think? She's plotting.
So, this is... I think we'll get into this later, but I'll just read my response. Yeah. It is strange. I would have guessed that she's playing them both, but if that were the case, she would have tried to keep Vin closer. As it stands, I assume she's going to make a move towards taking Ellen down, politically or otherwise, and letting Vin be close to her would risk Ellen learning her plan.
Yeah.
I think that's accurate.
I think you are entirely accurate. That was a really good... It was a non-specific, but... You're done with your cocktail. Specific, but a good guess. Like
you can see that?
I think you did it. Yeah.
We have cameras on or something? You can see that I drank all of my old-fashioned.
Hot! All right. This is so spicy, dude. I will never use the scorpion pepper hot sauce in this again. It's good. Like, it still tastes good, but it's overwhelming. So, with that, let's move into the breakdown of the book. We start with here, chapter 29. Let's talk about this logbook entry, right, that we talked about last week. Just kidding. Not the last week logbook, but this, like, fucking 2 pages of logbook that we get here, right before the Well of Ascension. Talking about Feruchemy, talking about some opinions about Rashek, talking about a number of different things. We find out a little bit later that this is the end of the logbook, but I want you to just evaluate the logbook for what it is here. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Now that you've read just about all of it.
Yeah, I've got a couple thoughts on there. Like, we know that he's aware of their Feruchemy and their ability to, like, save up attributes. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the phrase he explicitly uses, is that they like saved up their strength or whatever. I'd be really curious to know if he's aware of how they do it, like the process by which they are able to do this, or to, like, just really to what extent in general he understands. He is afraid of it, though.
He's, like, racistly afraid of it, which is crazy. Like, he is...
I don't know if he... Yeah, I suppose so.
He's got this, like, unknown... He is xenophobic, for sure.
For sure. But not for no reason. Like, it's not just being afraid because they're different culturally. He's afraid because they're different culturally and very clearly way more equipped and way stronger and, like, could actually become this dominant force that he's afraid of them becoming.
Racist was definitely the wrong term. He's xenophobic, but
xenophobic makes sense.
He also believes in the power of the people at the same time. Like, he's curious as to why they haven't taken over, but at the same time, he's also positive on some of their identity things that are kind of, like, going on in the background as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's super, super cool.
So, I mean, thoughts?
Fuck that guy, but cool.
Fuck the Lord Ruler, but
cool to hear. Yeah, like, I'm gonna take this, like, very stark stance. Fuck that guy.
Fuck that guy. He's not a good dude.
He's not a good dude.
The guy writing the book is not a good dude.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do we know yet if he's snapped? Like, we haven't had any references to allomancy. All we know, he's afraid of these, like, powers, which tells me he's probably not been able to do anything like that. And we still don't know, as far as I understand, if allomancy exists before the Ascension, or if, like, it's tied to the Ascension itself, or if they're completely separate things. Like, it's still, as far as I can remember, completely unknown. Unless you can prove me otherwise.
We are not provided an answer to any of that. However, we are provided some, like, theory posting, like some ship posting stuff, which is, we know Feruchemy exists, right? But we get no hint of allomancy. We get no hint of anything else, any other magic system, anything else existing. So
I'm just going to go ahead and throw out a guess here.
Fire it out.
Allomancy was created by the Lord Ruler by exploiting something with Feruchemy. Mm-hmm. Like, he took that process after learning more about it and crafted something new from it.
Yeah, that's
okay.
My mouth is on fire. God damn it. I just need to get through this. No, I think
chug it, man.
Your intuition is great, and I think I'm going to keep that as a prediction as well about, like, Feruchemy and, like, when allomancy came into being. So that makes a good amount of sense. We've discussed this a little bit prior, but this is kind of a new way to approach it and look at it.
I also think it's relevant to this reading because I think it's probably similar origins to what Vin is doing with ingesting Sazed's, like, earring.
That's an interesting move, right? It's got a very different kind of... When we get there, we'll talk a lot more about this, but that is a very, very interesting combination of things to, like, suss out exactly how that works. So, yeah. Identity is just such a crazy thing. It's just such a good thing. So, there's so much inside of the logbook. I love the way that logbook plays, right? And we get it right at the end of the logbook that this is the end, truly, of the whole thing. given that idea of everything that we have, and there's going to be little to no new information for the rest of the book at our chapter headers, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Where's your head at with the logbook? Just in general, kind of like, what do you think about what can exist now? Like, Vin has more information technically than we have. She's read the whole thing. But she thinks it's not useful because it didn't reveal things, and also it ended too early, which is funny also in like a meta-contextual way. But
I think we got a decent amount of information from it. It's not what she was looking for. She was looking for a guidebook on allomancy, and that's absinthe. Not absinthe. That's absent.
I wanted to make a joke, but I'm in pain. Fuck me.
So my immediate thoughts about sort of the context of this part of the story and how it relates to the logbook, because I haven't really thought about the logbook in general. I think it will be really interesting to learn about the terracemen in general, and given more context, I think it'll be interesting to look back on these passages and see how they relate to future context, but I don't know what to make of it right now. I think we get a lot about the Lord Ruler and who this person was before the Ascension. And right now, he seems like a very noble, guided, honorable person, just following through with some sort of prophetic sort of path that he fell into. We get a passage later on, like one of the chapter headers, that kind of brings that into question, where he becomes aware of, or he lets us know that he's aware that it could bring this tyranny along with it intrinsically. So there's that to think about, but more than anything, the comments from Sazed are important in that the reason why the book stops here, and he's immortal, and for all we know, he has a perfect memory. I think that's been mentioned before, and maybe that's just a myth. Maybe that's just a way of like making him seem even grander than he already is to the Ska or the oppressed population as it is. But if he has a perfect memory, why would he need to write anything down? This was a journal. This was a diary. This wasn't meant to be published or anything like that. What is interesting is that he kept it. So that brings a whole, that he kept the book. If he had a perfect memory and didn't need to like try to remember things in general from here on out, why would he keep it and display it?
As a religious text, almost like it was in a holy room. Some like a lot of like artifices of kind of religion and worship were in the room.
And it was like heavily guarded.
Yeah.
That didn't seem like the cherished item necessarily. She picked it up as a shield. Vin did.
Which is hysterical. Like the combination there is very interesting. And also we can think about the way that like the Inquisitor reacted, maybe didn't want to kill the book as its own problem. Mm-hmm. But
yeah.
I'm so glad that you had this reaction to the logbook, because in my first reading, I felt very similarly. When we get this like outpouring, this full outpouring in the end of the book, it is just so fundamentally, we're still left with so many questions. We're still left, just like Vin is, with questions, and it makes it really fun to explore the rest of the book, because now you have to piece it together. So,
right,
yeah,
it's kind of fun.
Sweet, man. I love that breakdown. That is hard to pin what you said as a prediction, though. I put it as a prediction, but
I don't think that's a prediction.
Yeah, you went on a tirade, and it was a good tirade. Like it was not even like aggressive or anything like that.
But there's nothing like
point
definitive about what I said.
No, right.
So I don't know.
It's all good.
I guess my prediction here is, and you might have to like not even tie it to a question specifically, but my prediction is the reason the Lord Ruler stopped writing in the logbook is because he now has a perfect memory.
You're right. That's about the line. Yeah. With that, we'll move into the next little comment discussion that happens. And I'm so glad that, again, like we've talked about these logbooks over the course of weeks and weeks and weeks at this point, and you've been like, I don't know what the fuck this means sometimes, and other times you've been like, this connects directly with the story, and then you're like, I don't know what the fuck that is, and now you're like, you have enough context, and it's kind of like filled out, and it's so cool to like hear your opinions at this point. So I'm sure listeners enjoy it, but I get a kick out of it. So I also really enjoy the conversation and discussion here between Vin and Sazed. It starts off in kind of like a fun, lighthearted beat. She makes a couple of jokes at his expense, and they bounce back and forth like humorously, especially in Vin's like C-3PO like speech. It's kind of clever and funny, but it moves to a very serious point. One that we pointed out, but Vin is actually afraid of losing her friends now. The people, the life that she's gained over the course of the last 8 months so far. It's just intense. It's a different style of living for her. And Sazed, as is his place in the story, returns with a healthy dose of wisdom and realism, like returns kind of the volley in a very real way. What do you think of this? By the way, I haven't said this yet. This is my favorite week of chapters. Like this is philosophical. It's deep. It's internal. Like this is a great week that way.
Yeah. This screams you.
This does scream, like this whole thing, the three chapters here scream me, and one is a good chapter still, but it's separate from the rest.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure. So super cool, super fun to like dive into this, because the entire time I was reading this, this is something Crossland loves. Like this is why, if I were to guess, not why you read, why we're covering this series, I'm sure this set of chapters had a profound impact on.
It's emotionally deep. Like this is Vin's revelations here are profound and emotional and incredible. This is like we haven't finished the book yet, so I don't necessarily want to sell or pitch this entirely. But Brandon Sanderson is a very plain writer, and that's a good thing for what he's doing. Like he is a very clean, easy to digest writer. But every once in a while, he ducks in to something like this and hits these like really hardcore emotional notes perfectly. And I just have such a tough time slamming on him, saying that he's just like a clean writer when this happens. So It's so good. These are some of my favorite chapters, though, inside of the series. Well, inside the book, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
This is why I was sold on this book series.
As far as this conversation between Sazed and Vin, like it was great. It was awesome. And Vin's worries are something that's super relatable to basically everybody. It is what people think about when they go to another chapter in their lives. Approaching going to college after high school. Like, am I going to lose all my friends? Turns out, no. Basically all my friends are still my friends from high school. Yeah. There's that. Start a podcast network
with your friends from high school.
Yeah. But that was a worry. That was a worry. And we had StarCraft to like bind us. So it's true. Fine. What I did appreciate was Stalsai. How do you pronounce that group of people that Sazed talks about? The people that believed in a finite amount of bad luck.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I think you're right. Astalsi. You're close.
Astalsi.
Yeah.
Vin's response is very level-headed, but pessimistic in that if there's a finite amount of bad luck, there has to be a finite amount of good luck as well. And that just completely cuts down their entire religion to a certain extent.
I think that's what's so fun about this. Astalsi is Sazed's religions in general are so interesting. The idea that this man is a storage unit for religions and just gets to share them and talk about all these different things, even though they have conflicting viewpoints, is fascinating. The way that he chooses to share the ones that he does with people when they need something is incredible. It's hopeful. It's optimistic. From his perspective, where he's like, here's this information, here's this knowledge that I have about this thing, and I hope it gives you some kind of solace. I don't expect you to convert, but I hope it lends you solace that people believe in the same kind of thing that you need right now. There's an entire group of people that did that in the past. And that's why, like, this Astalsi thing with, like, good luck, bad luck, being finite is so good and interesting is because it all just ties together so well, especially under Vin, someone who's experienced the ups and downs, mostly the downs and now the ups of life. And she just has this read. We talked about her powers at the beginning of the book too. She refers to them as luck. And so it's, God, man, it's so good.
Yeah.
This is where the book ties it together for me, man. Like this is the section of chapters where it just cranks in that extra little wrench that makes sure that your shit is tight. Like this is that wrench for me. Yeah.
So the other point that's, I don't know, kind of ironic here is that Sazed, I can't remember if it was just before this or like later on in this section, where Sazed jokes about Vin becoming an optimist based on some of her comments.
Yeah.
I think it was right before this comment about her becoming an optimist paired with her saying like, well, we've got to have a finite amount of good luck too. So why use it up? And like, man, it perfectly encapsulates the way she's always acted, even though we've seen her change so much throughout this story.
Yeah.
And like get away from that person that she was, who was so focused on her luck.
In this little 4-chapter section is one that is both reversion and acknowledgement of her character, right? So this is like, we see a full arc, a full sway of what's going on with Vin here. And I love that. It's so good. Which again, like you said, you're like, this is why we're reading it. And I'm like, yeah, this is why we're reading this book, PJ. Good call. It's a fun heist.
Yep.
There's a lot of other stuff. The magic system's crazy. But a combination of those things, this is like, again, I said it earlier, this is the wrench that tightens the nut right where it needs to be. Man. Vin does, based on this conversation, she moves in and talks about other things with Sazed as well. She tries something odd. She burns Sazed's pewter mind metal. And that provides us with a bit more of a delineation, of which we had kind of like previously talked about a little bit, but it lets us know that there is something that cannot be used here in a metal mind the same way that anything else is. She was stronger like pewter, but she couldn't access the powers of ferrochemy.
Dude, this was such a blue balls movie. I was so excited for something fucking crazy to happen. I was so ready for it. I'm not convinced this is the end of it. I'm not convinced that that's all there is to it. Like, she can't access it. She can see it, but can't access it. Fuck that. She'll break in.
Yeah, it's a fun little bit, especially because she's experimenting. So it's wild because it's a little bit different. It's just a little off from what you'd expect, which is fun. It's good. Tasty, spicy, delicious. Not unlike my Bloody Mary, of which is still torturing me for everyone at home. We jump from Vin's perspective to Kelsier's, and we also see a map that's tucked inside of this like table leg, which is a very interesting way of doing this, sent by Marsh from I put the Canton of Steel, the Steel Inquisition. I don't know what the fuck I wrote here. The Steel Ministry. I've also been reading the First Law again, so I fucked it up a little bit. Really, really interesting that we've got this picture now of the soothing stations. We know that there are like 33 of them or 35 of them, something like that, and that they're putting up new ones. But even more so that Kelsier mentally notes how soon Sazed will become kind of like a teacher of his people. So we move from Marsh to Sazed in kind of thoughts inside of this chapter from his perspective. It's kind of an optimistic note. We get this like really interesting picture of Marsh first, like sharing information, but then on top of that, like Sazed and kind of Kelsier's dreams for Sazed is really interesting.
Yeah. I guess what I want to highlight in this section is a very nice quote, a very profound, meaningful quote. And it's Kelsier talking to Breeze?
He's directly addressing Breeze. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about. Too proud not to be humble enough to go crawling about in a dignified manner, of course. And then, we Mistborn need not make sense.
It's especially funny to start with like we need do or we need not, or like he has another one. We need to do more than simply avoid. Like, and every sentence starts with these kind of like sentences. And he's just making jokes. He's kicking the fucking ball, and he kills it in this section, humor wise. Like, Kelsier's on something. I'm not gonna lie. Like Kelsier is himself for sure, but he is the funniest version of himself here. He's the most friendly version of himself, which is obviously important because of the kind of marsh thing that happens later, which is a completely, he's got to be a real person before he gets real angry and upset. So,
as far as the conversation about Sazed, and like becoming a teacher of his people, I am super excited for that day to happen. Like, Sazed's such a great character,
isn't he? He's one of the best, man.
He is one of the best. And here's where we get PJ's conspiracy theory corner. I still don't trust him. I don't know why.
Wild. Okay.
I don't know why. He's too perfect. He's too likable.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm just expecting to get burned, so I want to like prep myself.
So Kel uses this information to formulate a plan to tackle all the soothing stations at once, and the timing there will be critical. It appears to be critical as he's thinking about it and like trying to pull off this. This is an odd point, but it feels very heisty again. Like, what's interesting through, like, we've lost the heist a little bit as we move through the story. That's intentional. Like, it's been broken up over time. It's failed at least twice, and so they've had to like reformulate entirely. But this feels as though, again, replanning for the heist, replanning for some heist that like not everyone's aware of. There's this kind of secret thing going in. But Doxson, I don't think it's even like re-preparing for the heist or like reapproaching it that way. Last week we had the revelation from a lot of the members of this team that's not what this is about anymore. That was never what this was actually about. So I think this is the reapproach to the plan without approaching it like a heist anymore. That's a good call. You're definitely, yes. We've given up. We've almost given up the heist in favor of a coup, if that makes sense. Like it basically.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
So, yeah, checks out. But Doxson is in charge of.
It's a disaster waiting to happen. Getting a bunch of thieving crews to attack 35 soothing stations at the same time
with 4 or 5 Allomancers apiece. Yeah.
If that.
I think it says there's 3.
I thought you meant on the thieving.
One seeker. Oh yeah, not the thieving crew is fucking nothing. But like, it also this section also makes clear that like Allomancy is fairly rare. So it's crazy to have like 131 folks that are all Allomancers.
Absurd. It's really absurd, is what it is, and trying to coordinate that much at once, because you have to be perfect. In order for this to go well, you have to be perfect. You can't let anybody escape.
PJ, I am perfect. Just the way
you're not.
I am.
No.
What?
You could improve.
How dare you? Agreed, though. Like, it has to be. It has to be a perfect moment, perfect presentation in order to like make the group be able to pull it off. Yeah. Like,
how are you going to do that with these fuck ups?
So, moving on. Sazed tells Kelsier the story of the Bennett People, right? The Bennett People are cartographers of the Southern Island and a lot of Scadrial, the planet, the continent, and whatnot that we exist on, in an attempt to kind of like this is being pitched from Sazed to Kelsier. He asked for it to convince him to convert to a religion, and it's one that deals in like peace and harmony in a big way through the pursuit of knowledge. But it's his asking after that, after like trying to pick apart this religion about the Vala, that I think is a little bit more interesting. That of when the folks are kind of made martyrs, squashed, and they're at their weakest, how they fought back against something else. What do you think Kelsier is seeking here through discussing religion in this way with Sazed, and also like wanting to be presented with a religion from Sazed?
So I think wanting to be presented with a religion was a front. I think this was like a pump up playlist for Kelsier. Like we would put together playlists together for swim meets.
Right.
Do you remember that?
Yep.
Like we very, very carefully curate songs that were upbeat.
Metallica, Billy Talent, Sum 41.
Yeah, exactly. Shit like that. And I think this was Kelsier basically asking for inspiration, asking for a playlist, a song. He was asking for a song to get him hyped up for what he was doing. Because I don't think he really cared about the one that Sazin mentioned. He just wanted the one that he explicitly asked for later.
But he was open to like listening to something else, so that's why like I want to bring that up, is just because he asked like a blanket statement to like prompt Sazin to deliver something. But
I'm sure he's genuinely interested in it, and maybe something new will like stick in his mind, and maybe it'll be relevant. But I think primarily he just wanted to hear this underdog story. And hear this story of these people that were able to persevere even though they didn't have a whole lot going for them.
It is wild and correct that you verified this section is my favorite, and the reason that we're talking about this, because it is so accurate. And I think that that's part of this right here, right? We get the dissection of two religions, in quote, inside of the same section, and someone else's perspective on them. And I think that's so interesting because people have different perspectives on religion all the time. Like everyone comes to a religion or an ideology armed very differently. And I think that's so much, it's such a weird thing, but it's a real thing to evaluate religions in the way that like Kelsier does, or like Vin does when she's presented with religions. And this is just, it is character philosophical porn. Like that's all this is, but it's brilliant. It's brilliantly written. It's deep. It's fascinating. It's well done. And it's interesting how he jumps from 1 to 2, especially with that Southern kind of like I really like the story of the Southern traders, and their perspective on things. So with that, we move into chapter 30. We start off, of course, like we do every chapter, with the logbook. Oh, it's the logbook. Read the logbook again. Side note, we've got a lot of compliments on reading the logbook week to week.
Yeah.
So we're going to keep doing
Even though I like make fun of it all the time.
Yeah. But people are like, that's a good guidepost because I don't remember the book fully. And so they're like, oh shit, the logbook is a good way to like remember where we're at. So here we are, chapter 30. Most of the terracemen are not as bad as Rashik. However, I can see they believe him to an extent. These are simple men, not philosophers or scholars. And they don't understand that their own prophecies say the Hero of Ages will be an outsider. They only see what Rashik points to. They are ostensibly superior people and should be dominant rather than subservient. Before such passion and hatred, even good men can be deceived. This is my favorite. This is the best written logbook chapter, language-wise, of them all. I think, so far. It is clever. It is a little bit witty on the side of the Lord Ruler, but it's also, it's an observation of reality.
Right.
He's talking a lot about Rashik and like Rashik and the Terrace people. What are your thoughts there?
So my thought here is really to do with perspective, and I guess the manipulation of truth. Like, is the term domination attributed by the Lord Ruler, or is that used by Rashik? Because I could see it as there's obviously a rift between the two of them that's growing and growing and growing. And I could see dominant being a term that's being attributed to Rashik by the Lord Ruler. Like to Rashik's speeches and to his like thoughts by the Lord Ruler to try to justify to himself his attitude, you know? Like it's sort of a justifying of his hostility towards Rashik.
Yeah, he's trying to figure it out. He's trying to suss it out, especially given what we were given previously, right? Which is like the end of the logbook collectively in order. It is.
Yeah.
He's
I don't
working
know.
hard to figure out Rashik and the terrorist people.
He's working hard to figure out Rashik, yes, but I think he's predisposed to believe that Rashik is being hostile and malicious towards him on a personal level. And I'm wondering if him like attributing this sort of dominance rhetoric to Rashik as a justification, as opposed to just, we're a strong people, we should be this strong people. Like I could see that being the rhetoric that's actually being presented, and the Lord Ruler, whatever his name is, we don't know, because he's not the Lord Ruler yet, but for simplicity, we'll call him the Lord Ruler. Him taking that and twisting it a little bit and making it more hostile towards him as a means of justifying his disdain for Rashik, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. What's wild to me, I've read Meditations many times. This logbook reads like Meditations, but
yes,
with like a weird future aiming sense to it. So it's also like driving a plot beat, right?
That's exactly what I was thinking about yesterday when I was going through these notes and going through these logbooks. Like, this reads very similarly.
Entries. Like, these are like true, like, and especially given the comparison to Marcus Aurelius, like there's this stark similarity, especially when he's talking about war things, like war moments. This feels like it's pulled there. Less when he's talking about some other things of like comparing like some like Stoic philosophy bits. But when he's specifically journaling about like things that might happen or like things that he worries about or stuff like that, that feels like Rashik's journal. Or sorry, excuse me, the Lord Ruler's journal about Rashik.
Yeah.
With Rashik.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know what the fuck I'm saying.
No, I got you.
Yeah. Vin, though, at the beginning of this chapter, finds herself at another ball at Keep Venture. Chanelariel is missing, of course, but the total number of partygoers has increased dramatically. We come to understand this as this thing of this being the final ball. This is where everything's sealed, so that's why everyone's here. But she is treated very much like a leper for the first time since the beginning. And, like, the beginning, it made sense. But here she feels offended, and I think it's really sad to see this kind of like unwinding of growth for Vin. She's still on the positive side of this equation, but to see her treated poorly here really kind of hurts in a foundational way to me her as a character.
Yeah, this is clearly the progression of the last interaction with Shan, which was very hostile and very not hostile, very dismissive and cold. But even with this context, I can't quite understand why she was treated with such an extremity of coldness from Shan, unless she knew something more about Vin, which I don't think is the case. Like, she obviously knows potentially that she's a spy from another house. Maybe that's the reason. But even then, I feel like it would make more sense to allow her to be around and play nice. Like, there's no strategic benefit, I feel like, to just shutting her out like that. So, and this highlights that a little bit. Like, I still don't get it.
I've read this Shan section a number of different ways, and I agree with your primary reading. Having read through it 3 times now, the way that I try to think about this is, if we think about it from Shan's perspective, she actually doesn't want to encourage a fight with Vin, right? She actually has removed herself from even trying to fight with Vin. Vin only gets involved because she wants to get involved with Ellen. Like, that's why she's here, right? So Shan actually took the information that she got appropriately and then removed herself from Vin, and in turn had no plans to like kill Vin or do anything bad against Vin, because she was just like, she was a cog in the machine. And so this interaction that we get, of course, between Shan and Vin when they're fighting as Mistborn versus Mistborn is really interesting, because Shan never predicted it or even thought that it would ever become a thing. Also, I don't think she egged it on, really. She didn't really encourage the direct conflict between the two of them that much. Like, she was abrasive, she was aggressive, she's not a great person, but it's interesting to think about the fact that, like, her plan was to take out Elend, which is why we have the conflict that we get. But at the same time, Shan was mean to Vin, but never expected to be pushed back against so hard to the point of death. You know?
Right.
Like, it's a weird thing the more that I've thought about it. I like it, but, like, this is unexpected. This is more unexpected for Shan than it is for
Elend, that's
Vin.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
Totally fair.
That's a lot, but, like, I fucking thought about
that
this
was a lot.
I've thought about this a lot. This is one of those moments that sticks with me out of this novel. I often talk about Mistborn, and I'm like, I love Mistborn. Compared to Red Rising, it feels like it's missing some action in places, except for it isn't. I fucking realize that I'm so wrong. This has so much action peppered through each, like, 100 pages-ish. We get, like, a 20-page action scene. And, by God, I'm wrong. I'm aware I'm wrong. But we learned, of course, the reason that we've chatted about a little bit here. This is to be the final ball, where alliances are solidified, and we see Vin again being alienated from these groups for that reason, because Renew is not the biggest house at the party. What cuts even worse, though, of course, are Elend's words. And when that emotional breakup and relationship ending conversation happens.
Dude, this passage sucked.
Sucks. It hurts.
It really sucked. What sucked even more, though, was listening to it on audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Michael Kramer's delivery is so fucking good.
So hurtful.
Directly painful and hurtful.
Like, it was so pained. And in such a perfect way, you know? Like, we got to hear Vin be broken. Like, truly fucking broken as Elend is walking away. Just fuck. We used to, if you haven't read Red Rising and therefore haven't listened to us talk about Red Rising, first of all, do that. Absolutely do that. But we fawn over Tim Gerard Reynolds and the way that he portrays the first few books of Red Rising. This rivals that.
Michael Kramer, there are only 3 voice actors that I really love, that I've heard, I should say, between all of the things that I've listened to as audiobooks. Michael Kramer is one of them, which is Mistborn here. And he fucking destroys the emotional resonance inside of this arc. Like, it is night and day, man. It is crazy.
Yeah. I will say, as a disclaimer for my, like, what would you call it?
Bias?
Not bias. Like, my approval of this. I'm giving my stamp of approval. There's a word for it. I can't remember. I can't think of it right now. But my giving my stamp of approval on this is based on the fact that, like, I listened to this book fully entirely 100% of the time. I have not listened to it not at 2x speed, because, like, it's slow enough at 2x speed to fully comprehend and see it as, like, a conversational speed.
Kramer is a slow talker, and
okay.
I like his narration style, but I agree with you. That's actually why I, at the very first time, like when I was reading through things, I increased to 1.2, because I think it still gets across the performance, but it isn't overbearing. But 2 is fine. Read it as you will.
I mean, at 2x, the performance stands.
Yeah,
so.
I think that's what's wild about it. Like, that's what's crazy about the way that he really builds out this world and this character. And as such, his emotion that comes through Elend here is fucking awful. Like, it is painful to witness this.
Necessarily so, though.
Right. We get why, but
yeah, it just sucks.
It sucks, especially given what we learn later, which is that this was intentionally meant to be that way to try to get her out of the city. So, like, given the context, we know that it's not. She understands it as, like, you don't love me anymore, kind of. And that's like 90% of her thought process. She's got the little conspiracy bit where she's like, I think he might be saying that just to say it because he's worried, which she's right on, as we learn from his perspective. But right now, this just abrasive speech cuts deep, dude. This is worse. This is the worst version of a breakup that I've ever seen put into text form. Fuck. All right. So, of course, Reen's whispers also return in tandem with the emotionality of the section, right? Because she's deep, she's dark, she's in this recessive state. And those early insecurities that we're reminded of from the beginning of the novel return to bury her in those feelings. And my fucking God, Reen sucks, right? Like, Reen sucks.
Yeah.
And he is like this interesting, in her perspective, like embodiment of evil and ruin and awfulness.
So I think it's a little bit different than that. I don't think it's necessarily evil or ruin or anything, because ultimately, like, this is her. This is in her head. And she's attributing these thoughts to him. But I appreciate this presence cropping up again. Like, it is an indication of her headspace. And like it simultaneously gives us more insight into her familial relationship with Vin in general, but more directly, it tells us that she is questioning herself and she is being down on herself and she is beating herself up. She's attributing entirely her negative thoughts about herself to somebody else and calling it an external force, but really what it is her beating the shit out of herself.
Right. It's this insecurity manifest, right?
Yeah.
Like, it is.
Exactly.
Like, we'll do something and we'll be like, that's not that good. Like, it's never going to be good. No one's going to like it. And this is that made tenfold from someone's insecurity standpoint, but also like it's a very real perspective on those insecurities made manifest. I think one of the most fun parts of this chapter is Kliss's reveal. Right, we talked a lot over the last couple of weeks talking about Kliss and like some of the things, and I like made a big deal out of her being like this big like fucking gossip, and she has this fucking heel turn, which is intense. And she makes the perfect informant. We've been given the picture of informants from Kelsier with the example of Hoyd and himself, but then given like Kliss and like her real like kind of like mercenary-esque buy me off kind of flaunty taunty thing. It's really fun, but she's got a real venom to her when she's actually talking like a real person, which is a complete switch. It feels like the Wicked Witch of the West was just revealed, and previously she'd be talking like the fucking Scarecrow, which is like really nice and sweet and there and with it and kind of fun, and then it gets boiled down to this really aggressive awfulness, and it gives me the heebies. Like, it gives me it shakes. This is one of those moments. But of course, not only is the plan, she reveals plot-wise the plan to assassinate Elend through Shan, through the gift, like to pay through like a fucking necklace, but also that Lord Straff himself believes this to be the move and paid for this to be the move, planned for this.
Yeah. Being an informant with the cover of being an insatiable gossip is so fucking good.
And especially because she's on the other side, like, kind of, you know, like
that's what makes it fucking perfect. And as far as we understand, she's not part of a major house, right?
Right. That's why she has this. She's a minor house.
Exactly. So the entire time I'm thinking about this, I'm like, how could she have not given something away? Like, how could she have not let something slip? And I'm like, oh, wait, she's not actually a gossip. Like, that's not actually who she is. That's what she's playing. That's her role. Like, that's her character. So, like, even after the reveal, it's ingrained in my head that she's this gossip that everybody's going to know about all of this shit.
There's a lot of minutia here that's just like instilled over top of the story. And I love your read. I love your read on Kliss, because I totally agree with it. I think Kliss is a genius, underrated character inside of this like arc that we get from the balls with Finn.
Yeah.
The fandom doesn't talk about her at all, but I fucking love
well,
it. You
Cliff
should talk about Kliss.
Cliff is my dog. Kliss is great.
Kliss is great, but like not on our side, but like so well written, geniusly presented. So.
She's not against us. Like she's actually. I feel like she's more on our side than many of the other noble people. Like she's like a mercenary, basically.
Yeah,
boil
like
it down
the
to
Wicked
that.
Witch, she recognizes that she's being soothed, right? Which is wild. So like she understands that like she's being emotionally manipulated and like leans into it a little bit, which is interesting too. She's like, well, I know that you're pushing me, and I'm gonna tell you the thing, but also I am pushing your button specifically with what I'm saying. She's got this like flirty attitude that like
very flirty. Flirty is a good way to put it, but at the same time, she's not against us. She's a neutral party. Right. She is a party for hire. She's a mercenary for information.
Right. Yeah.
As far as Straff goes, though, like learning that he's in on this shit. Fuck that dude.
Fuck like, Straff. Straff is such a piece of shit in this book.
He's a giant dick. He's an absolute giant dick.
Straff sucks. He is the worst. Yeah. So this, of course, like Kliss pushing on kind of this delicate nerve, leans into like how she feels about Ellen and kind of like really exposes it, this final moment of her revealing internally and externally that the word that she wants to use is love. She loves Ellen. And Vin has not been expressive from the beginning of the book and has become more expressive as she's become more of a person and understanding emotions, and kind of her emotionality has grown. But she loves Ellen. And so this is a big change. This is a big switch. This, of course, leads into this epic confrontation. So we go from this moment of heightened emotional reality into a physical conflict. And I think that combination is really kind of like a sweet and sour, delicious mix here. But Vin then, of course, confronts this assassination party and takes out a couple of thugs, some Peter people, and some coin shots, even throwing one off the fucking building. I laughed out loud. This is cinematically perfect. This is a humorous movie that you can imagine, like someone being thrown off, and you get the Wilhelm scream, for instance, and like this is that.
This is
moment
where
of,
that
like,
would live,
off, or like through glass or whatever. This again, said it before. This is my favorite section of the entire fucking book. Like I really like what comes next. I'm not gonna lie, but I adore this section.
Yeah, there's really something like fascinatingly satisfying about the way that Branderson writes action sequences.
True. Yeah.
We've discussed it before. We've talked about this. It's entirely devoid of anything flowery, and it's very matter of fact.
It's like a screenplay, to be honest. Like it's very clean because you have to like try to make it work without, adding context.
Exactly. And for the most part, even though we're in the perspective of the hero of the action sequence for the most part, like it's devoid of any internal thoughts, any inner monologue, which is interesting and kind of cool. Like this is a stark contrast to Pierce Brown in the way that he writes action sequences.
I was almost afraid of that for you, if that makes sense. Like I was almost afraid of the contrast between writers here for you.
I love it.
Because it's so aggressive. It's so different stylistically. Like Blake Crouch to Pierce Brown to this, like all three of them write entirely different.
It's so different. And while I appreciate the flourish and the emotion that's captured by Pierce Brown in the way that he writes like razor battles, this I think I resonate more with.
Interesting.
Just the very structured and rigid, not structured, but the rigid matter of factness and progression of an action sequence. Yeah.
Right.
Like every movement is very carefully dialogued, or like not dialogue.
I just said dilated. Like it's just like it's right there and it's precise. You know, it's got that
catalogs. Is what I was thinking of. It's a catalog. It is a progression that is just vomited up for us, and I don't know why, but I love the way that this is written.
I think that's definitely one of Brandon Sanderson's like traits that I adore as well. So I agree with you there. Makes sense.
Yeah. And like, I don't know. I like both. I really do.
Right.
I love the way that
it's not
Brown
even
writes.
that one's better than the other. Like, it's just like they're
just
different.
very different.
And
yeah,
this is where like writing and like reading gets really fun, is when like you have these completely different ways of presenting the same kind of thing. And language just has this complexity to it. And that's why I'm really glad that we got to do these kind of back to back, because they are so wildly different as far as stories go in a bunch of ways. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, of course, we have to talk about the end of this, which is kind of the rest of the action scene that we led into here. It's this epic confrontation. We've already dealt with most of the other people, including an additional Mistborn, but she downs that one, and then she proceeds to duel Shauna Lariel, and it's a really clever use of ATM, right? Like the idea of like burning out an image to get an idea of where they're going to be, and then reseeding it, and then reburning it, so that she can like outpace where fucking Shan is inside the sequence. She murders her with a broken arrow that's being shot at her. She breaks it in half and stabs her once, stabs her again, and that alone is such a visual.
It's clean, man. It's a really clean fight.
Dude puts on a clinic.
And like, this is something that is so, I'm going to talk about this later. I know I am. Like the end of this section where we get, oh God, Waylon?
Yeah, Waylon. Yep.
Waylon. We get his perspective. Like, this book is written so well to be adapted to TV, to a movie, to something. Like, these fight sequences are written like choreography notes almost. And it is exactly like the way this is written is exactly how I would expect it to be portrayed on film.
Perfect. Like Brandon Sanderson is such a good, and I don't think that I think people are aware of this or might not be like aware of exactly what it is, but Brandon Sanderson is actually such a good writer for film. He is a screenwriter without knowing it. A lot of that is because he doesn't use like a lot of prose flourishes and things like that. Like what he does is he writes prose almost under the guise of screenwriting, but he writes, it's just so interesting. It's so different. And that's why I really enjoyed Brandon Sanderson's writing. I love a number of writers. Brandon Sanderson is one of the most unique writers out there, where he writes in this very flat style, and it being flat is a good thing in his circumstance.
Flat feels like a negative connotation, but it is. I mean, it's a praise for what he's doing.
Right. This is a perfect scene. Like this is perfect. What it needs, or not what it needs, but what I would imagine to do myself is add a little bit more flourish, color, metaphor, simile here. And he is just he's clinical, I think is the way that we describe it. Clinical's good. He goes through these things. So like he is just boom, 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 action, action, action. It's fantastic. And I truly think fantastic in both the sense of like something that is incredible, something that is well executed, something that is magnificent and magical. That sense of fantastic. Also, it is perfect. It's well executed. It's brilliantly written. Okay, we've got one more little point here before we move into chapter 31. Of course, we learn that she's this Mistborn, and we down this little ATM bead, and we get this fight back and forth, of which we talked about is absolutely brilliant. We've got the ATM turning on and off to like absolutely masquerade that and like make it this big thing. But Shan at the very end of this dies, is murdered by Vin, absolutely destroyed. Vin is dealing with like 6 Alamancers at once. And
is murder
Well,
I don't think it's murder.
It's not murder. You're right. But I'm saying murder is like a positive for Vin. Like it's a Vin positive thing. But she's destroyed. Like she is killed by Vin in a way that is so upsetting for Shan, but also great for us as people. So I love this little bit.
This whole thing's brutal. And I think I appreciate more so now that we didn't get, like, we got a little bit of inner monologue from Vin here in these like one-on-one, very intricate battle sequences, as opposed to the previous, like, what, 4-on-1, 5-on-1, 6-on-1, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, in those situations, we get the just actions being taken, because that's kind of how you have to do it. But with this one-on-one Mistborn v. Mistborn, you need the inner monologue. You need the thoughts of, hey, she's doing this. Here are my options. Here are my choices.
It plays like a fighting game, like a
really
fucking Mortal Kombat.
Does
right? Yeah,
it really does.
Yeah.
God, it's so fucking good, dude.
Yeah. Back down square, back forward square, back forward triangle. Like you get that feeling here. Which is a good thing.
You do. It's astonishing how invested I got in these sequences.
Right.
Man, I just loved it. And I think, what has Brandon Sanderson written before this book? Anything?
So this is his 8th novel that he's written himself. He wrote before this, his first published novel is a book called Elantris, which we will eventually get to inside of our Cosmere. I think we're going to do the whole Cosmere over the course of time, but interrupt it with some other things.
You're assuming that we'll be friends for more than like a year after this.
Fuck you. So we'll continue to do the Cosmere over time. But Elantris is a one-off novel, and that was the only thing published before this. This novel is what convinced Robert Jordan's wife, I can't remember her name, unfortunately, I'm sorry, folks, at home. She was his editor. She is an editor, so she was so there with it. She also edited like Ender's Game, for instance. She is instrumental in Orson Scott Card's thing. Looked up her name. Harriet McDougal is her name. But Harriet McDougal.
Okay.
But she's got an incredible career. But she edited The Wheel of Time under Robert Jordan, and she read Mistborn and the obituary that Brandon Sanderson wrote for Robert Jordan when he passed away. And that's why she chose him, is because of the style of writing with Mistborn and the obituary of like his appreciation for him.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool.
We move in to chapter 31, which again, I think I mentioned this many times this week at this point, but this is my favorite chunk of chapters from Sanderson. And Branderson, and really love that we call him Branderson as well. I get a kick out of the whole thing. So starting with the logbook here. Other men worry whether or not they will be remembered. I have no such fears. Even disregarding the terrorist prophecies, I have brought such chaos, conflict, and hope to this world that there is little chance that I will be forgotten. I worry about what they will say to me. Historians can make what they wish of the past. In 1,000 years' time, will I be remembered as the man who protected mankind from a powerful evil, or will I be remembered as a tyrant who arrogantly tried to make himself a legend? This is such a good logbook chapter.
It is.
It's all about legacy. It's all about how people remember things. What'd you think?
But it's also a point that I brought up earlier in this episode, in that...
Yeah, you're right.
What?
Yeah, I just said fuck you. But yeah.
Well, right. I mean, that's fair in general. But this brings into question this guy's motivations. Like, Lord Ruler, sure. I feel like that entity is entirely different than who we're reading right now. You know? Like, the entity of the Lord Ruler is not the same as the person that will eventually become the Lord Ruler.
Yeah. that tracks.
And it felt so very different. And it felt so much like this person is dealing with this sense of nobility and duty. And that gets undermined here. Like I mentioned, like at the beginning of this episode, was this point makes me question his actual motivations, whether or not just the fact that he knows that he could be corrupted and imbued with an immense power makes me question his motivation entirely, because he knows that's a possibility. It brings the rest of it into question.
Yeah, it is. I think in combination with all the like downpour that we got from Vin, this small section of which exists between the end that we read with Vin and the prior kind of journal entries that we had. So like we have to kind of reconstruct this on our own. This section is fascinating because it really kind of paints this interesting picture of who the Lord Ruler was before, and also like not only how he thinks he is perceived, but also how he thinks he will be perceived down the line, which is again a very heavy Meditations Marcus Aurelius thing, right? Which is like your perception or people's perception of you should matter less than what you actually have done. But he of course, the Lord Ruler's caught up in like thinking about it and like trying to contemplate the eventuality of what he will become after the Well of Ascension. And it's just such an interesting little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So we cut from there to the fun of Clubs' place and some jesting at Doxson. We cut to like another optimistic, fun scene that Brandon destroys. Like this is his joy. This is his place. You can tell that he loves writing these happy bar scenes more than he likes anything else. But it's also at Doxson's expense. Like it's kind of a fun, like little bit joke before Vin barges in from her absolute destruction of all of these Mistings and Mistborns with her news that she just killed Lariel. Huge deal. Shannon Lariel is dead. I have said before, I love how warm this is and optimistic it is. And the turn that we get when she enters is interesting, even with Kelsier's perspective about him that she's shocked at what she managed to achieve.
Yeah. So first and foremost, this sort of banter back and forth between the guys. This reminds me perfectly of when we used to live together.
True. Yeah.
Like all of us
dudes get home from work. We all have a chat.
Yeah, exactly. Just bullshitting. It was great. It was so much fun.
Like sitting around the campfire having a chat, and this is so good. And then we get it interrupted by like Vin really killing the standard in a lot of ways. Like, whew.
Yeah. Vin is abrasive.
Yeah,
and
versus the rest of the scene for sure. Yeah.
But like even without the context of what's been happening right now, she is an abrasive person. And right now she is unhinged to the point where she is brutally honest. And that's, I think, necessary for everybody. Like they need to hear this sort of outburst from her about them being like basically noblemen without titles, and hear this perspective of you don't know what it means to be ska. And we know for a fact that there are at least a few of them that do. Like Doxson is like his history was as a plantation ska.
Yeah.
So I think for those that didn't ever experience that stings a little bit and maybe gives them something to think about. But for those that did, like Doxson, and I really don't know who else, because we haven't had that much experience on their backstory, but for Doxson specifically, it probably stings also, but also probably brings more directly into focus why he's here and what his plan is and what his goal is. Because it's so easy to fall into the comfort of whatever situation that you're in if it's better than what you were in before.
Right.
So stay hungry, I guess, is the best way to sum that up.
That's such a good way to put it, because like I think in a lot of ways it takes into consideration like other theming crews, other ways that like people have thought about these things inside of the world, but at the same time it keeps our characters focused in a real heavy way to like stay hungry, stay humble, get down.
Yeah.
Exactly. It feels right, and I don't disagree with you at all there. We of course need to also evaluate the same like emotional precedent that we're talking about with Vin. It's important to remember that she's like a 16 or 17-year-old kid, right? Like between like the passage of time that we've experienced over the course of the story, we're 8 months in. She's 16 or 17 at this point. And her emotional intelligence and just general intellect is very interesting. It makes her feel a little bit older than she actually is. When Kelsier comes to her on the roof after her outburst that happens, that outburst is shocking, but real, and it makes a lot of sense. And it's fundamentally important, especially for Kelsier to hear this conversation we debated at length about the like merits and not merits of the nobleman argument, right? Like, you don't kill the noblemen. Not all of them. There are people that are bad, but not all of them are bad. And right. This argument ultimately has a great tone because of the way that Kelsier kind of ingests that information and then digests that outward to us as the listener, as though it's something that they did wrong. It feels like, when like a sibling knows or like a parent knows that they fucked up with something. I don't know if you've ever had the experience. I have. But like when a parent knows, that's like, okay, I did most of that right, but I fucked this bit up, and I'm telling you because I want to make sure that you don't take the wrong message from what I did or said. It feels like that. It's not a reprimand. It's addressing the problem. What like Kelsier is trying to react to here is a lot of his comments, a lot of his commentary has been so impactful in the way that Vin's thought about things, and Vin feels like she hasn't been heard. She's like half voiced a lot of these opinions, but now it's full bore, how fucking dare you kind of a conversation. And I think it's an important one to have. I'm glad that it happens, of course. She's in such a tight spot, right? She's doing what's right with the parts that she wants to kind of like execute on and pull the trigger on. And also, at the same time, because she wants to do these things that are semi-pro noblemen, she's pushing away her friends, which is a difficult thing for her to accept and acknowledge as an idea. But I think that this is one of the most emotionally empowering chapters or powerful chapters for Vin. We get deep understanding of where Vin is coming from inside of the situation. And like I've said before, chapter 31 is the chapter for me. Like this is my chapter emotionally. It's just resonant throughout. We move, of course, from this to how Vin is sure that the Inquisitors are tracking them. She comes to this realization in this emotional moment. She's sitting there crying with Kelsier on top of the roof and talking about a lot of these very emotional things. But she also has this very honest conversation with Kelsier about bronze and copper. And she thinks that the reason that the Inquisitors were aware is because they were able to pierce copper clouds. So it's a powerful assertion because Kelsier doesn't fully buy it. He does not believe that it can be pierced. He's tried. He's spent hours and hours and hours focusing individually to try to pierce a copper cloud. So it's an interesting kind of standing statement for her right now and what's going on power-wise.
Yeah. Emotionally, this is a really powerful section.
Yes.
We get backstory on Vin and like her actual feelings and like who she is as a person, what she wrestles with. But we get a further sense of interpersonality between Vin and Kelsier and further understanding that they're peers as opposed to teacher pupil, like this is more progression in that front, which is cool to see.
Yeah, it's just such... This is, again, we've talked about it, we've said it, the reason that this is my favorite is because it hits all of these different notes, right? It's a highlight on top of the entire story of, like, these are the things we should really care about. And I think that I think that a lot of people do disservice to the reason that they love Vin because they think about, like, where she came from, where she goes. But this is This is the depth of emotional understanding that she finally has, and she reveals and she exposes. And this is just so important. And her honesty with Kelsier is revelatory in a number of ways, including in this physical manifestation of her understanding of powers and ability, in which she's so honest that Kelsier's like, no Allomancer can do that. You're just stronger than everyone else. Like, you have something that no one else has. Because I can't do that to you, but you can do it to me. So what the fuck does that mean? It's just such an interesting, powerful moment for Vin. But also, we can assume via that, like, that the Inquisitors follow the same path, and they might have similar power levels. So
I don't know if we can assume anything about the Inquisitors.
You just don't assume. You assume everything and nothing at the same time.
I assume everything is fucking with us.
PJ, we're about to talk about trust.
We're not.
Nobody
trusts anything. Nobody should trust anything. Fuck trust.
We cut from there, of course, from this conversation to that of Elend, right? And the conversation that goes on with Elend. And Elend's conversation is fascinating, especially about his reveal of, like, understanding Club's shop after tracking Vin, and surmises what Vin could really be up to. This is very interesting, considering our limited POV with Elend so far.
I think the biggest part about this is we really understand what kind of person Elend really is. Trust is something that you mentioned, and it's something that I have a hard time doing for a lot of characters in these books. I have a hard time trusting characters like this because it just feels so ripe for the possibility of corruption and heel turns, you know?
Sure, yeah.
Like, I could have absolutely believed that Elend was some sort of obligator in disguise. Or whatever, like, just waiting to pounce. Understanding entirely what Vin was from the beginning, and just waiting to pounce. Even if it wasn't, like, knowing that she was a ska, but knowing that she was doing, like, conducting some sort of manipulation. Like, I could have absolutely believed that that was him. And finally, we're starting to see, because we get his perspective, we get to see what he's actually thinking and really get to realize that he's being genuine.
Right.
I don't know.
Especially compared to Jostes, right? Like, Jostes is this, like, wild other side of the Nolan equation. And
yeah, if we want to put it into the terms that we've brought up before, we've brought up action versus thought before. And there's kind of a couple steps between there. Like, there's action, and then there's actually being true to those thoughts.
Consideration, right?
Yeah, I suppose that's the right way to put it. Is that here where Elend learns that Vin is probably a part of a thieving crew?
Potentially, yes. That is here. Yep, right.
Like, his inner monologue isn't anything of horror. He's not upset by the idea that this dirty ska thieving crew was trying to infiltrate him. It was one of awe and, like, not pride, not what's the right way to put that? Like, it's awe.
Awe, I think, is right. I think that's the right way to put it.
Like, he's not upset with her at all. He just wants to learn more and uses it as a point of conviction to understand that the ska are so similar to them and very potentially the same species with the same capacity to learn as the noble people. That is not the pervasive understanding of the ska in modern society. Like, he's using this as a point of education and revelation. That's super cool to see.
Dude, you killed it. I don't have anything further to expound upon that. I think It is such a unique moment. Again, we've talked about it before. This is why I love this section. This is why I settled on being willing to do this book for the book series. Is like, it's this kind of moment. We've been building to these emotional and philosophical revelations, and now they're exposed. Like, now they're the raw roots of everything. And I'm so glad that you keyed into that. So, in a similar way, Josties is kind of an odd guy, right? Especially kind of the fun that like Elend bounces about his feelings with Vin, and he's got this kind of like interplay back and forth. He's a strange backboard, if we want to think about like basketball, right? Like bouncing it off and like bouncing it off the ground, whatever. It gives us insight though into the fact that Elend didn't really want to break things off with Vin and really does still like her. He wanted to do it for her protection, of course. What's your read here? We talked a little bit about some of the other things, but what's your quick read?
We're able at this point, I think, if we wanted to call Elend our boy.
Literate scamp. Yeah, he's our literate scamp, our boy.
He's our literate little scamp. That's true. But we've been calling the Lord Ruler our boy for a while now. And I feel like Lord Ruler hasn't deserved it. He hasn't deserved it. Elend has, I think, at this point. And I'm going to eat my fucking words when we learn that he is
the Lord Ruler, right?
No, he's a fucking traitor, piece of shit, garbage, human, whatever. Like, I'm sure I'll eat my words. But for now, we can call him our boy and I'll be okay with it.
Love that. Love that for you. But the very end of this, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but like Lord Straff, Venture fucking sucks. He is one of the worst people that I've read in a novel, period. He is a vile person of whom dislikes other people and even his own son. I think that's what makes him so aggressive here, is his dislike and like disloyalty even to his son is aggressive and almost like anti-parental in a weird way. Fuck him. But at the end of the section, of course, it appears Elend has worked out most everything except for the fact that Vin could be the Mistborn. But he is pretty sure about the Thieving Crew, about character traits, about other things. So what's your read on the end of that section?
I mean, Straff is like, yeah, he sucks. He's from our perspective an evil dude. But at his core, he is doing what is best for his house. And yeah, it's fucking cold and horrible to like cut out your own son if it means strengthening your house. But if your entire motivation is your house, then I don't know. Fuck him.
For sure, fuck Lord Straff. He's a piece of shit. Put that man in the dumpster. No one likes him. Anyway. With that, we move into chapter 32. Here, our last chapter of the week. Leading it off here, of course, is our logbook section. Though many terracemen express resentment of Kelenium, there is also envy. I've heard the packmen speak in wonder of the Keleni cathedrals, and with their amazing stained glass windows and broad halls. They also seem very fond of our fashion. Back in the cities, I saw that many young terracemen traveled in their furs and skins for well-trained, well-tailored gentleman suits. This is interesting. It provides some context of Kelenium. It provides some context of the way that people dressed at the time. It's fashion, baby.
Who doesn't want a dope suit, man? But like, just the idea of a couple dudes with just ridiculous, like, earrings.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Like, just I don't know, man. Like, it is the clash of of punk. Like, it is punk suits, kind of.
Yeah. Farakemi and like the whole terraceman culture. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it made me think of those black skinny ties that you had.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The Regency ties that had the word on them, right? Like punk.
Yeah.
What was the other one? It was punk and then rebel, I think. Something.
No, it was something more
simplistic.
Driven. Was it driven?
It was driven.
It was driven.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good call.
That's what I thought of reading through this. Like, just something a little bit more, just a little bit of a twist on modern classiness.
Yeah.
I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We move from this conversation about classiness and being a classy person to a conversation with Spook, right? And I think it's a really endearing one. He's just this very shy kid. He's the tin eye of the group, and he totally understands that she doesn't want to go out with him, which is a unique emotional experience that happens, and you get it at certain points in your life, and you're just like, we don't match. You don't think that I like you, etc. This is that for him. But it's such a simple thing. And it's a nice touch inside the story. It's just very gentle. It's kind of a whisper of not romance, but of appreciation and love, and kind of that like ability to be able to discern relationships that you have with people. Like, it's like, you should be a friend, not my girlfriend or not my boyfriend or whatever.
Yeah.
But you can't choose who you love, and some people don't deserve it. It's kind of the end quote that Spook delivers as well, is like, or that Vin says, like,
yeah,
really appreciates him.
That quote from Vin, you can't choose who you love, and some people don't deserve it. I would argue you could make a case that quote is a theme for this book.
Oh, entirely. Agreed. Hell yeah.
I mean, it's an important lesson to take away in general for everybody. Mm-hmm. Like, be in tune with your emotions, but also realize that sometimes those emotions will drive you the wrong way. Sometimes they'll drive you the right way, but they'll leave other people kind of hurt in the process. Like, emotions aren't rational, and they kind of suck sometimes.
Yes.
I'd really like to avoid them as much as possible, but that's not possible. Like, it's just not the way the world works.
If I could be a black hole, I'd be a black hole.
I would. I'm not sure how I feel about Vin asking to keep the handkerchief.
Interesting.
Like, I feel like there was yes, but like, I could completely understand her doing it. I could also completely understand her giving it back. But I felt like that was a point that was a little bit more glossed over than anything else, and it just felt not fleshed out enough to really like have a real emotional like connection to it. Like,
so I don't fully disagree with you. What I want to paint is like a full picture here, right? So what we move into after this is the picture of Vin finally getting a lesson on tin, right, from Spook, as a sort of final bullet point on top of the 8 basic elementic metals. This ends up being the final lesson, which is a discussion of like what you see versus what you don't see, right? And so I think, especially with the handkerchief, I think this ties in a little bit. I think it pulls it back, because Vin sees this as a proclamation of love, as a proclamation of things, but what she isn't seeing is everything else around it with Spook, which is like his life has been one where he's been distant from people, and he hasn't been able to relate because he's from an odd part of the country and speaks a slightly odd language. And so like what's really important, I think, with the Spook versus Vin relationship here is recognizing that this lesson that we get about tin is directly relational to the lesson that Spook is providing us on Vin's perspective. And I think that it is wild and wide-reaching and really cool. But I think it's important to like read precisely between the lines like he wants you to here.
Yeah, no, I entirely agree with you. I wish there was more.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I wish there was a little bit more expounded upon.
Sure.
Like, even if it was just internal monologue, because we're in Vin's perspective here.
Yeah, we could monologue.
Like, we could have gotten a sentence of
from Spook's POV. So
right, and Spook is so cold about it. Not in a negative way, but in the way like, yeah, fine, whatever, yeah, keep it. I don't give a shit.
I don't think he's that negative. Like, I think he's more like,
he doesn't
keep it. You know, like, kind of warm about it. Like, just take it.
I think he explicitly shrugs when he says, yeah, okay, whatever.
But his also, I just want to clarify this. His speaking style and conversational language is completely different from anyone else. So I
It's
think
true.
that like his
true.
like shrugging is, we read it as aggressive or like dismissive, but I think it's just his way of trying to relate emotion, you know, because of his language barrier.
That's fair. I wish we would have gotten more context from Vin's perspective of why she wanted to keep it, because I would see this as her wanting a tangible object to say, like, people care about you.
I think that's what it is. I agree with you.
I think that's what it is too. But I'd love that to be like, I think you could make a very touching monologue internally from Vin's perspective about that. And instead, this comes across as flat and a little bit dismissive. I don't know. It just felt like not an afterthought, but it was kind of there without it actually meaning a whole lot. And yes, like you and I are going through this at a fairly slow pace compared to what everyone else reads at. So we can really dig into these like little aspects.
Yeah.
And we can really determine, like, yeah, that's probably what she was thinking. That was probably the intention. But if I was breezing through this, I don't think I'd put that much thought towards it. Yeah. And I just wish there was a little bit more care taken to expound upon it a little bit from Vin's perspective.
That makes sense. I'm down with that. I think that is, it's a good read, I think, on this whole thing. Like, you're not recalibrating anything. You're just recommending that, like, man,
it'd be like a sentence.
When you make the movie, make this like feel that sentiment of the handkerchief and like her choosing to keep it. Like, that's important.
Knowing Vin, I would have seen it entirely in her monologue of her thinking about offering the handkerchief back, but not wanting to give it up.
But yeah, exactly. You're right on it. That's entirely what I would think would be delivered as well. So like, good.
I thought about giving it back, but I don't want these feelings taken away.
Right. Which is what we get a lot of in this section, is like, I don't want to lose the thing that I have. It's her conversation when it says it earlier, right? Which is like, I am so lucky to have all of these things happen, and I don't want to lose it. And that's so important to Vin's character right now.
Right.
Kelsier and Vin, of course, discuss Mare and kind of get into his side of the relationship with someone else, which is interesting, especially composed versus the Ellen chapters. And it brings something into focus, PJ. It brings trust into focus. Trusting your characters in text. It literally says, trust. How dare you not trust someone's personal history? And
Who
PJ...
Who the fuck would trust anybody?
PJ says, fuck you. Fuck that.
I have such a difficult time trusting characters in books like this. You, I don't know.
Fuck you. How dare you?
How dare you?
How dare you?
It's something really important to bring into focus, though, of how can you trust people, especially when things go bad and you blame them for it. It's impossible, man. Mm-hmm. Like, that's such a difficult thing to do. Mm-hmm. And you need an outside perspective in order to, like, forgive them.
Right. And that's what makes this whole thing so interesting as far as, like, sharing goes. It's very open from Kelsier's perspective and kind of an apology in a lot of ways. As we get through a little bit more of the chapter, we see kind of Kelsier's generosity and sort of this part of his personality that's trying to portray this forgiveness, this acceptance as genuine, right? So they head to the ska houses of just random folks, basically, and visiting them, sharing great news and good news, and they call him the Lord of Misting, and they give him all these other titles that don't matter to him, but matter to them as like a marketing, whatever. Like, it's pervasive, it's part of the culture, but to them, in its own way, you know, this is like Jesus coming down and like hanging out in someone's house, right? Like, this is that moment where he just steps into the temple and freaks everyone out. But he doesn't think of it as that way. He thinks of it very minorly. He's very low key in the whole thing. He's just like, I am trying to distribute my appreciation and sentiment on as many people as possible, and to be human and to ground myself in their humanity as well. So they're looking up to him, but he's also looking to them at the same time.
Yeah. So I think in general, calling him the Lord of the Mists is a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Like there is good and bad to it. Good, very clearly, it spreads information. It spreads his myth, and to a certain point, like, gives people hope, you know? But at the same time, this Messiah complex that's being attributed to him, it means that he has so much more responsibility personally than what he initially like signed up for.
Yeah.
There are like, it just splits his attention even more, because on top of trying to accomplish his goal and accomplish what he's been setting out to do, he also has to do it in a way that keeps these ska people like satisfied. I don't know.
Satisfied is the right word. Like you encapsulated it.
I'm sure there's a more like elegant way to say that.
There definitely are like touches and flourishes that people could add to like try to portray that. But dude, killed it. That's great, especially given that scene, given that context. Again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is my favorite week of this show. Like I'm very aware that this is what I wanted to focus on and talk about, is the episode before the Sanderlanche, as it's called. So this is an emotionality section that just rocks and makes everything else make sense. So in that same regard, we of course go out to Marsh's soothing station. They're shocked, of course, to find this body when they arrive after leaving. It's skinned entirely. Its head, skull crashed together and absolutely smashed to a pulp. Blood everywhere. So much blood that they don't believe that it could come from a single body. They quickly snatch Marsh's pile of notes that were clearly meant to be hidden in the leg of the table, like they were doing previously, to exchange information with clubs, and run away into the night. Our note here is that, of course, from this point of view, as we've experienced it, that Marsh is dead.
Fuck, dude.
Yeah.
I was really getting to like him. I was really liking Marsh. And this is why I don't trust people.
Well, that's interesting because
this is why I don't trust authors.
Right. Yeah, right. That makes sense. He's abusing your emotions right now.
I also don't trust their characters, but this is why I don't trust the authors themselves.
God, I know I think I made a joke about this earlier, but I focused in so hard on Marsh's and Kelsier's relationship because I think it's so important to like note all those different elements as we move through, as we think about like the components of their relationship. And now finally it's all dissolved. They came to terms with each other, like each other, and then Marsh is dead. He's gone. Smashed into a pulp. Like that's what fucks me up. Like the dude's head was just there, and
then not. I mean, it's there.
It's everywhere.
Like,
it's sprayed.
A cosmic sense is there.
I'm laughing, but I'm crying. Yeah, no, I feel that. I feel that for sure.
Yeah.
Marsh, of course, leaves this coterie of notes, and so we work our way through that. It details an interesting question. There are a number of notes that he tries to make on the Inquisition, and he's kind of writing it down because he's afraid that he's going to be killed or hunted down. So one of the things that he says is, where does the power difference of an Inquisitor come from? Why are they so much stronger than traditional Elementers? And how do they recruit Mistborns into the agency in general? He, of course, finds a number of mistings. This is a prediction, but I want your thoughts.
My thoughts are pretty simple. I don't think that they're recruited. I think they're made. I don't think they're found.
Interesting.
I don't.
I've been trying to avoid saying interesting because of that tweet that made fun of me for saying interesting when you say shit. But
yeah, no, exactly.
Interesting.
No, I've mentioned this before. Mm-hmm. I think that the Lord Ruler is able to create Mistborn, especially if Allomancy is a byproduct of his ascension. I don't see why he couldn't. Like, And if it's true that allomancy was bestowed upon the like noble families that were, what's the term? Like if you're agreeable with, not agree, like if you're allied with the Lord Ruler, the idea was that they were bestowed allomancy. The other flip side of the coin is that allomancy existed elsewhere.
Yeah.
And anybody that didn't agree with and wasn't allied with the Lord Ruler was culled. Like those are the two options, really, with how allomancy was intrinsically tied with the Lord Ruler's ascension. Those are the two options, really.
It's tough to like pull apart, like fucking monkey bread.
If it's true that it was something bestowed, that means the Lord Ruler is able to imbue power upon something, which would mean that these Steel Inquisitors don't have to be Mistborn.
I want to make sure that we're not discounting my monkey bread theory here, because monkey bread
theory
can be pulled out and then stuck anywhere on monkey bread to like stack in a direction that you want it to.
I mean, you can make it. You can make.
So, to your point,
I fucking hate you. I hate you so much. Making a kuchenbroche out of monkey bread does not make it different.
I'm so glad that you latched into that. So you take something, you'd shift it a little bit, and that was kind of your perspective on the Lord Ruler, maybe what he's doing with allomancy, what he did with it, and maybe at one point. And I don't know, dude.
I don't know.
You're a loss for words because I said the monkey bread shit, but
the monkey bread shit is fucking ridiculous, and I love it.
We cut from there to this very interesting and aggressive perspective of a new character, Waylon. Waylon is going through collecting A-Team geodes, being suffered and punished by the Pits of Hatson. As he crawls down into the crack, he gets pressured as he's like shoveling his way in through with his shoulders. He gets the daggers of the sharp geodes burning into his skin and cutting him and making him bleed against all this. And climbing into the rocks, this intense perspective. It's very claustrophobic. It makes you feel like you're kind of suffocating for these 2 pages. And it's incredible writing. This is some of my favorite writing of the book. It's brilliant. And this is just this is a flex of that, is this pressure, this claustrophobia of the Pits of Hatson. Mm-hmm. And the moment that Wallen emerges, and he sees Kelsier there. And Kelsier says this line, "I am what you will soon be. I am a survivor." Fucking is the best line in the fucking book.
Yeah. So I think for me, I just love that we jump perspective here. Like we established early on that perspective does not mean main character.
Yes, with trusting.
And it allows for this really cinematic framing of the story. Yep. Because like think about a movie or a TV show or whatever. We haven't talked a whole lot about any sort of adaptation of this story in general, but specifically like cinematic adaptation. This is something that you need to see, is external points of view of things that are happening that are relevant. And how else do you see that but a different point of view in a first person story?
God damn.
It's great.
Right.
It's fucking awesome.
This is so good. Waylon giving us the lens into the experience that Kelsier had and the pain and the suffering that he experiences, the survivor of Hatson, and like his being like he fetched a geode, he can live for 7 more days, and he thinks about that actively. And then you cut from this like low perspective of someone crawling out of the pits to Kelsier standing on like a hilltop equivalent, like just a little bit elevated. And you see this dark figure going, "You can be a survivor too. You can do this. You will be this. I'm going to make you this." And that is this intense emotional release from this guy who's portrayed the pain of being in that situation. He's also, it's the pain of the ska. It's everything all at once. And it's impossible to wash it clean. He is the perfect mythological figure. Like The dude not only is a perfect embodiment of a lot of this stuff, but he is also perfect statue, you know? Man, I love this. I love this bit. This is, again, nails it, kills it for me.
Yeah. Super impressive. Super fun.
I know it just went off, but did you have thoughts?
No. I mean, that was my sort of takeaway from this scene was...
It's perfect. Like you said, embodying the other POV. So we can get someone else. We can get another Scott. We can fit in a realistic picture because we've talked about this before, but like the murder of the Scott earlier out inside of the keep after the ball. It's great portrayal of like the Scott to keep us grounded. We had some other moments that have popped up to keep us grounded. This one grounds us the furthest, the deepest, the most in the actual toil of an individual. And that's great.
Mm-hmm.
So as you know, I, of course, choose to end these episodes as I do, and I love that for us, and you get to be beaten up emotionally by the way this ends, but I decided, as opposed to like leaving this kind of cliffhanger of chapter 32, I want to include it here and have this conversation, because I think that the pits of Hathsin destruction that Kelsier goes through here is truly incredible. It's a form of therapy for him and his relationship with Mare and like what he lost here. And this like 2 pages is also intensely emotional for him. Like he remembers crawling through, and he remembers the reason that like they couldn't use Allomancers is because it's too delicate and it would break and like they'd lose stuff. So it is just this combination of emotion, emotive response that like I imagine the like very emotional Magneto scenes from the new trilogy of X-Men movies. So when Michael Fassbender is sitting there and he's like focusing, concentrating, freaking the fuck out and controlling things, like the bar scene that he does where he like pulls the knife and like stabs someone else in the head. There are a number of moments like that, and this has that element to it of intensity that Kelsier really evokes.
Dude, it's so good. It's so good.
I know I went on like a 2-minute tirade, but I can't help.
Yeah, but like regarding Waylon's perspective, my takeaway from that is that like it is kind of the realistic and scientific point of view of like what ATM mining is, and that ATM is produced from drippings. Like it's essentially is of these like crystals, and these crystals create or contain trace amounts of ATM, and we get this situation where those crystals, because they have these trace amounts of ATM inherently within them, can be manipulated by iron, like iron as an allomantic force.
Yep, iron and steel. Yeah. Pushing, pulling. Yeah,
I guess steel too. I feel like steel would be safer. So like, right. Why not? Like, if all you're planning on doing is destruction, and crystal is sharp.
Yeah, to say the least.
Why not use steel and push things away from you to destroy things?
But either way, yeah, Cape Collapse is great. Pits of Hathsin, it's revenge for him in its own way. Like, it's revenge against the Lord Ruler. It's revenge for him against House Venture. It is revenge for Mare's death. It is everything at once, all at once, like I've said before. Like, this is so much emotional catharsis for Kelsier. Like, this is the moment in a lot of ways. And it's crazy. So, we move from that. We've got the final logbook entry at the top of chapter 33. We're close now. Oddly, this high in the mountains, we seem to finally be free from the oppressive touch of the deepness. It has been quite a while since I knew what that was like. The lake that Fedek discovered is below us now. I can see it from the ledge. It looks even more eerie from up here, with its glassy, almost metallic sheen. I almost wish I had let him take a sample of its waters. Perhaps his interest was what angered the mist creature that followed us. Perhaps That was why it decided to attack him, stabbing him with its invisible knife. Strangely, the attacks comforted me. At least I know that another has seen it, and that means that I am not mad. This is a wild way to end the episode, because this is wide-ranging in a lot of assumptions about the deepness, about mists, about the whole thing, and the idea of this pulsing sound, or these people that have been following through the mist. Not people, but like persona, maybe?
Right. So these things throughout this entire book we have been attributing to being mist wraiths.
Yeah, as
right?
It's been explained. Yep.
What the fuck is going on with the mist wraiths and their ability to invisibly stab people? Like
Dunna. Yeah. I feel that.
Like, are we right in being afraid of going out into the mist as ska?
Or
like, are they actually harmless and something else is going on? Like, what the fuck is going on, man?
That's the fun part of this section. This
No,
ends. This ends brilliantly.
No, give me an
for us
answer.
to, like, feed
Answer
in.
me definitively, and I'll hold you to that.
Oh,
answer.
the mists are definitely a representation of someone's personality put forth by some like extra godly ordinance created by a universe of shattered realities that have then traced.
But what about
down,
the mist wraiths?
That have then traced themselves down to the basis level of this planet, and therefore this is a manifestation of someone's distant personality.
Okay.
Do you agree?
Maybe. That makes it feel so much more clinical, and it also makes it so much more not necessarily exclusively clinical. It makes it feel so much less external and more.
It's still external because it's very far off. Anyway,
Yeah.
point being, I just made a joke,
but
that's not reality.
I know you're making a joke about it, but that makes it tied to something tangible and present.
This is a good clarification point. If something like this is tied to something tangible, is that a problem for you? Or could it be like mathematically in the same way that
it's not a problem.
Works?
I just want to know what that thing is.
Got it. Okay. Just curious.
Yeah. Not a problem, and I expect it to be something like that because I don't know. I'm not one to believe in something that's suddenly entirely universally pervasive.
Yeah.
Like there's got to be a source somewhere, whatever that might be.
There's a boundary.
Even if it's something that's unreachable by humanity, it's got to be technically tangible somewhere.
We are at the end of this week, PJ. I feel like we hit a ton of notes. We were wide reaching, and yeah. Any other thoughts that you have on this chunk of the book?
No, I think this pretty much covers it.
Cool. All right. So next week, we embrace the Sanderlanche. We've got 58 pages of madness, chapters 33 through 36. This is not the end yet. That will be the penultimate episode to the end of the book. Going to be crazy. Very excited. February is going to be a very fun and exciting month. We are leading off the short pours, PJ, with a conversation with PB Doodles about the incredible Red Rising playing cards that are coming.
I'm excited to talk about that.
So
like that's going to be a
cool.
ton of fun.
So fucking cool. Following that up on February 14th, we will have a romance episode coming out that I'm a part of. We're going to be talking about the entire spectrum of romance smut and some of the different variables that exist inside of the space. Check out the short pours for sure. And then our third episode, PJ, we're going to announce it here. You do it. Do it.
So Rob Hart is the author of the novel The Warehouse, which both of us have read, but he also has a book coming out soon called The Paradox Hotel. And ahead of the release of that book, we are going to be doing an interview with him.
We are the release day podcast for that. So we are actually
perfect.
The not the announcement, of course, because it happened prior, but it is fucking incredible. Get your pre-order in right now. You will love it. It's going to be a killer time. I'm very excited for that show.
Yeah.
So that comes out on February 23rd. So February going to be a packed month for short pours, and then we'll resume the monthly release there, in addition to the regular show, of course, that you're listening to. So
will not affect this feed. Feed will remain as it is, but we'll just release extra content on short pours.
All right. So this week's is kind of a combination of things. It's your favorite villain reveal, but it's the idea of tension that's built throughout the story. It's the idea of that like Darth Vader lurking in the background of your story. What's your favorite moral villain conversation that permeates the entire media that you love?
Oh,
I want you to start with yours this time.
Oh, we'll start with mine.
Yeah.
All right. So my favorite villain reveal is, I think it'd be fair to say both of our favorite, at least within our top 5. I know that for sure because of something that we've talked about before. Video games.
Oh, fuck,
which is
yeah.
BioShock. And the reveal of Atlas being Fontaine and being the actual villain of the entire story.
And the way that he's manipulated you the whole time. You as the player,
Yes.
like you as a person, have been manipulated by this dude inside of the plot. And it's just like, fuck you, dude. Yeah, agreed.
It's such a good reveal. It's such a good game. If you've never played BioShock,
It is one of the
do
best
yourself
games.
a favorite. It's so good.
Of course, this section is going to be very heavy in spoilers in general. So, following that up, a similar reveal that kind of hit very deeply. I love this idea, but so Tim Pearson from our Discord recommended Tyler Durden in Fight Club. I can't fucking
That's
believe
fair.
I didn't think
Is that a villain?
that's
a hard distinction.
It's a presence, right? So we didn't say villain when we were talking about it in our question, our posing, but it is this moment, it's this turn of heel, kind of like Shan Alariel, which is what I was trying to play into that for the record, because Shan and Kliss both change very dramatically from how we understand them into this episode. So I leaned into that idea here. And I think that fits perfectly, right? Like it is a presence. Tyler Durden is this whole thing.
For sure.
He also said the lead of Gone Girl, which is mine. So mine is Amy Dunn from Gone Girl, because I think that is the most brilliant. And they're both David Fincher, because David Fincher is a fucking god of film. But that is my favorite reveal of all time in anything.
Okay.
Is that switch that happens in Gone Girl is fucking perfect. There's there are 2 other fictional ones that I love in books and literature, but if we're talking about something that I don't want to spoil for you, because we're going to talk about it, that's it. That's my choice.
All right.
Which I totally agree with that for sure. Continue onward.
I mean, I'm going to go with Sharkbait from our Discord. Fae villain reveal is a great question. Honestly, I struggle to think of any better than the Jackal from Red Rising.
The Jackal's reveal is also so good. He's got that Darth Vader presence until he shows up. He's lurking, lingering.
So the next half of this is something I don't understand. So we will continue reading it, but know that I don't know what I'm saying and I don't know how I'm pronouncing it. So, but I do love the Rye Sand, and that's all in caps, by the way, and parentheses. The caps are autocorrect, and I'm loving it, and I'm leaving it.
But I love it, so.
Yeah. On parentheses. Reveal in Akotar. What does Akotar stand for?
A Court of Thorn and Roses. It's a book series.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar. There we go, though.
Yeah.
That has been pervasive throughout our Discord recently. Akotar. Haven't had the courage to just straight up ask what it stands for until just
but now you know. It is funny though in that way. Oh man, we obviously talked about Fight Club a little bit. I just want to say rip Meatloaf for a number of reasons, but also talking about Fight Club.
he
that was
Meatloaf died a couple days ago.
Yeah,
his name was Robert Paulson.
His name was Robert Paulson, right?
His name was Robert Paulson.
His name was Robert Paulson.
His name was Robert Paulson.
Following that up, Summit from our Discord as well. One of my favorite villain reveals is in the Bone Season series by Samantha Shannon, when Paige discovers the human lead government is actually being run and manipulated by the alien Refam. And I have not read that. And
I'm not familiar
I want to read
either.
it because Bone Season hints fantasy, but this hints aliens. Now that you said it, and I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? I'm being thrown for three fucking rolls in my hand, and you just fucked it all up.
Yep.
I love that, though.
Yep, exactly. Next, I've got Ivana from our Discord. A lot of these are from our
Patrons.
Discord.
Yeah, there are patrons.
So our Discord is open to patrons. Patreon.com/wordsandwhiskey. If you join that, you can get onto our Patreon, only Discord. But Ivana from our Discord. The first thing that popped into my mind is the reveal of Borg in Star Trek. The cube, the resistance is futile, the feeling of imminent doom. Yeah.
So good. This is such a good call.
Super good. That's a super good answer.
This is such a good answer. Borg is incredible. I would also say she mentioned something. If you haven't watched The Usual Suspects, PJ, have you seen The Usual Suspects?
I haven't.
I can't even say it. That reveal in that movie is another one that she recommends. It feels like a Guy Ritchie film.
I will
love it. It is your type of movie for sure, PJ.
Sounds awesome.
So good. So good. Ivana nailed it this week. So, Artificer, following up, of course. My favorite reveal is that Tom Hanniger, Jensen Ackles, is the bad guy in My Bloody Valentine. And that is a great reveal inside of that. It's a trip that no one expects, but you know him as the bad guy that everyone loves from previous things. So it's you expect him to be the kind of, he's got that energy about him, but you want to like him because of that energy. He's the bad guy that everyone loves, right? And so when he actually becomes the bad guy, you're like, oh shit, I got fucked by the movie and my expectations.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Windrunner from Instagram.
We love you, Windrunner. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Windrunner. I have a great villain reveal, but it's from Warbreaker. What do you mean, but? You're being I don't know, but it's from Warbreaker. It can be from Warbreaker without being but.
It is from Warbreaker, but we are probably going to do Warbreaker on the show. So...
Oh, am I allowed to
cautious.
read this? Oh, okay, perfect. Random Cosmere spoiler.
I know. Thank you, Windrunner.
Awesome. I guess I'll take the next one then.
Yeah, for sure.
From Marcus. I was having trouble thinking of a good answer to this week's question, so I went to my sister for aid. She said Jigsaw from Saw. That's
a fucking great answer. I'm not going to lie. That was...
Yeah.
I was perfect. That is a perfect answer to this question, because you obviously have the menace throughout the entire story of Jigsaw, but then you get the presentation of who he is at the end. Genius.
Yeah. What a guy.
What a guy. What a good call.
What a guy Jigsaw was.
For next week, given the way that this chapter's gone, given the way that a lot of things have gone, given our Saw answer here right at the end, we want to ask for your favorite example of torture. Favorite example of torture. Be it generally, of course, detestable. It's detestable in nature. But, tell us what you think it is.
And it can be, either direct or indirect. So the inspiration for this is...
It could be emotional torture. Don't read it wrong.
It could be emotional. It could be whatever. Here we get, within this section of Mistborn, the example of what Kelsier went through.
Yep.
Day in and day out. But specifically, Kelsier was tortured day in and day out to go find an ATM geode in order to continue living. That I would consider to be, within the context of what we're asking, a form of torture. So something like that, something horrific that people are subjected to, whether or not it's a conventional source of torture or not, however you would frame torture to be, I'm cool with it.
And I think that is perfect. So, with that reminder, next week, at the end of this section, of course, we are reading chapters 33 through 36. That's going to be what we're reading next week. It's about 58 pages in the paperback. So, it's going to be a fun time. Very excited. And that's where we'll leave you for this week.
Thank you, as always, to Tim and Andrew for helping us keep our show's lights on. As
they do a ton
always,
of work, for the record.
They do a shit ton of work. As always, check out our links in the show notes. You can find our schedule, Patreon, previous episodes, our websites, and our social media accounts all in one very convenient location. How dare you?
How dare you? I'm pretty sure we need to make a How Dare You t-shirt at this point because we've said it so much on the show. But on top of that, make sure that you're following us on Instagram, Twitter, Reddit at Words and Whiskey Pod. Words Whiskey Pod, excuse me. And Words and Whiskey Show Gmail if you want to answer any of these questions. We share a lot of things on our socials, so check it out there. Again, if you want to join and enter into our community, you can enter at patreon.com/words and whiskey for the rest of the month, meaning like literally less than a week at this point. If you want to hop in on it, you can at a $3 price point as an early adopter. Feel free. After January, it'll be at $4 to hop in to our Discord and kind of chat with everyone. You get some bonuses. You get our doubles cuts, which are anything that we chop out of these episodes, plus a bonus question that we like kick off with an icebreaker. So we've got a lot of things coming among the network, including all the interviews that we talked about and pitched earlier. But it's a very exciting time for us.
For sure. Do we have? I mean, that's it. Thanks.
So cool.
Thanks for listening. This has been so much fun. This was a fucking ridiculous episode, but it's been fun.
Sayonara, folks.
Have a good one. Thanks for listening.